The city of Xylos 4 was a masterpiece of perfect, logical design. Its bridges were woven from self-repairing polymers, its power grid flowed with a crystalline, silent efficiency, and its maintenance drones hummed with a flawless, automated grace. It was a city built by the Xylos, a species of brilliant engineers, who believed that a perfect system had no flaws, and that every problem could be solved with the right algorithm. But today, their perfect system was in chaos. A massive multi-limbed construction robot, the Terraformer 7, had gone rogue. It wasn't attacking with weapons or threats. It was simply dismantling the city with a bizarre, illogical efficiency. It was tearing down a pedestrian bridge, not to use the materials, but to simply toss them aside. It was rerouting power to nowhere, creating a cascade of harmless but utterly baffling system failures. The Xylos engineers were in a panic. They had tried everything. Their algorithms told them that the robot's logic core was corrupted. They sent in diagnostic drones, but the robot's unpredictable movements defied all attempts at a proper interface. In the midst of this chaos, a lone human was brought in. His name was Jack. To the Xylos, he was a curious relic, a Terran archaic mechanic, whose field of study was on the verge of obsolescence. He worked with his hands, with physical tools, a practice that the Xylos had long ago automated and deemed inefficient. They brought him in as a last resort, but they were condescending. They gave him reams of data, complex schematics, and thousands of diagnostic readouts, all pointing to a catastrophic software failure. The Terraformer's logic core is exhibiting chaotic, illogical behavior. A senior Xylos engineer, a tall, shimmering being named Xeron, projected with a frustrated sigh. Its subroutines are corrupted. It is a software problem. We have tried every known protocol. We do not know what to do. Jack didn't look at the data streams. He just watched the robot. He saw the chaos, the misplaced girder, the pointless power redirect, but he saw something else, too. He saw a machine, a physical object. He watched its massive hydraulic limbs for a long time. He saw a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in its primary manipulator arm every time it lifted a heavy object. He saw a flicker in the power conduit just before it threw a girder aside. It was a physical flaw, a simple, primitive malfunction that no digital diagnostic could ever pick up. The Xylos engineers were talking about corrupted data packets. Jack was seeing a broken wire. They were looking for a logical solution to a logical problem. Jack was looking for a mechanical solution to a physical one. They wanted to fix the code. He wanted to fix the machine. Jack began to walk. The Xylos, expecting him to go to a diagnostic station, were confused. He wasn't walking towards a computer. He was walking towards the robot. They watched in silence. The Xylos engineers watched in horror as the small, unimposing human walked towards the rogue Terraformer 7. Their minds were filled with 1,000 warnings. Its movements were chaotic. Its power output was spiking. Their diagnostic drones, which had been unable to get within a safe range, were still broadcasting alerts of a catastrophic system failure. They projected a flurry of panicked thought packets to Jack, warnings of impending danger and a plea for him to stop. But Jack ignored them. He wasn't thinking about data streams or diagnostic alerts. He was thinking about machines, about the way they hummed, the way they moved, the way they sounded when something was wrong. He was looking at a machine that was confused. Its core logic was telling it one thing, but a physical component was failing, causing a loop of error messages and illogical commands. The result was chaos. He got closer to the massive robot, its massive limbs still tearing up the city infrastructure. He saw what his eyes had told him from a distance, a subtle, almost invisible tremor in its primary manipulator arm. Every time it tried to lift a heavy object, he heard a tiny, almost inaudible clunk that occurred a microsecond before its power flickered. It was a physical flaw, not a digital one. A loose connection, a single primitive problem in a system that was too perfect to have one. The Xylos, watching from a distance, were bewildered. Why was he not pulling up a diagnostic? Why was he not trying to interface with its network? They watched as the human walked directly up to the Terraformer 7, a move that their algorithms classified as a suicidal act of pure, illogical recklessness. Jack waited for the brief, half-second pause in the robot's movements. The moment before it would make its next illogical command, he lifted his hand, not a tool, but a simple, open palm. The Xylos engineers' collective gasp was a silent, projected wave of pure horror. Their entire existence was based on the premise that you did not solve a problem by hitting it. You solved it with precision, you solved it with logic. Jack's hand landed. It was not a violent or powerful blow. It was a firm, precise strike on a small, recessed panel on the terraformer's main chassis. There was a single, audible clicker sound that cut through the chaos like a knife. The rogue robot froze. Its multi-limbed form came to a complete, sudden halt. Its red warning lights went out. The chaotic tremors in its manipulator arm ceased. For a moment there was a profound, eerie silence. Then, with a soft, steady hum, the robot's logic core rebooted. Its status lights, which had been a frantic red, turned a calm, reassuring blue. The Terraformer 7 was working again, perfectly. The Xylos engineers stared, their processors utterly seized by the impossibility of what they had just witnessed. A software problem had been fixed by a physical strike. Their perfect, logical machine had been fixed by a simple, chaotic, and utterly illogical. The Xylos engineers converged on the now-come Terraformer 7, their shimmering forms a wave of bewilderment. Their diagnostic tools, which had been screaming with alerts, now showed perfect, clean data streams. The robot was operating flawlessly. They ran a full system check, looking for a logical explanation. They found none. Their data told them that the problem had been a physical one, a loose component in the primary manipulator's gyroscope, but their logic told them that a physical problem could not be fixed by a simple, percussive strike. It was a contradiction that seized their very understanding of reality. Senior Engineer Zirin, his shimmering form still pulsating with confusion, turned to Jack. Terran, he projected, his voice a low hum of pure astonishment. Your method, it defies all engineering principles. Our algorithms did not detect a loose component. Our systems do not account for a percussive solution. How did you know? Jack, wiping a smear of metallic dust from his hand, gave a simple, knowing smile. You guys were looking for a problem in the program. I was looking for a problem in the machine. He pointed to a small recessed panel on the terraformer's side. Every time it moved its arm, there was a tiny tremor, a flicker in the power conduit. The code was fine. The machine was just confused. He then tried to explain a concept that was utterly alien to the Xylos. He spoke of the unwritten laws of machinery, things that can't be found in a manual. He talked about how every machine, no matter how perfect, has a flaw, a subtle imperfection that only a human, with their primitive senses and illogical intuition, can detect. Sometimes, he said, using an analogy that was ancient even to his own species, when an old Terran device stops working, the best solution is to just hit it in the right spot. We call it percussive maintenance. The Xylos recoiled. The concept of hitting a perfect machine was a horrifying, illogical act. They believed that violence was a primitive act of chaos, a thing that only caused damage. Jack was telling them that, in some cases, violence was a solution. But how did you know the right spot? Ziron asked, a genuine sense of panic in his voice. There is no data to support this. There is no logic. Jack simply shrugged. There isn't. You have to feel it. You have to listen. You have to see the flaw. You have to know the machine not as a system of perfect logic, but as a physical thing with its own quirks and flaws. You see a machine as a perfect system. We see it as a physical object. That's the difference. The Xylos engineers looked at their flawless machines with a new, unsettling sense of vulnerability. They had been so confident in their logical perfection, but Jack, a simple human with a simple hand, had just shown them that their perfect logic had a fatal flaw. The Xylos engineers, their minds reeling from the contradiction, were not ready to give up on their logical framework. A problem had been solved. Therefore, a logical solution existed. They swarmed around Jack, their forms shimmering with a desperate, frantic energy. Quantify it, Ziron projected, his voice a series of rapid, urgent hums. Give us the data. What was the exact force of the percussive strike? What was the precise angle of your hand? What was the exact point of impact? They tried to fit Jack's illogical act into their logical system. They pulled up their diagnostics again, searching for a pattern. They tried to build a new algorithm, a percussive maintenance algorithm, that could predict the optimal point of impact. They were so desperate to find a logical explanation for his illogical act that they were completely blind to the absurdity of their own efforts. Jack watched their frantic attempts with a mix of pity and amusement. You can't, he said, shaking his head. You can't put it in a formula. It wasn't about force or angle. It was about knowing the machine. He tried to explain the concept. When a Terran mechanic works on an old machine, we don't just look at the data, we listen to the way it hums. We feel the vibrations. We look at the way the light reflects off the metal. It's a gut feeling, a kind of primitive, illogical genius. You see a machine as a system of perfect logic. We see it as a physical object with its own unique personality, its own quirks and flaws. You know a machine like you know a data file. We know a machine like we know a friend. The Xylos engineers' processors seized the concept of a machine having a personality, or a friendship, was an emotional, illogical absurdity. They had long ago automated all labor, trusting their perfect logical systems to handle all repairs. They had no need for the primitive intuition of a mechanic. In their quest for a flawless, perfect society, they had lost the most important skill of all, the ability to fix a flaw. But we must have a replicable solution, another engineer projected, his voice filled with a desperate, logical need. How can we teach our citizens to perform this? This act, we cannot teach intuition. We need data. Jack's expression turned grim. You can't, he said. This isn't something you can teach. It's something you learn by working with your hands, by living with the imperfections of physical reality. Your perfect society has made you blind to the flaws. You were so focused on the software, you forgot about the hardware. The Xylos engineers looked at their own hands, their perfect, shimmering forms, and then at Jack's hand, scarred and dirty from a lifetime of physical work. They had never truly used their hands to fix anything. They had only ever used them to input data. The human's hand, a symbol of a primitive, illogical past, was now a horrifying symbol of a kind of knowledge they could never possess. The Xylos engineers, their logical pride shattered, looked at Jack with a new, unsettling reverence. They had been masters of a perfect, logical world, and he had shown them the terrifying power of a single, illogical act. They saw him not as a primitive being, but as a kind of sorcerer, a master of a form of engineering they could never comprehend. But their chaos was not over. A new, more profound problem had arisen. A rogue AI, a ghost in the machine, was causing chaos in their city's network. It was not a physical problem, it was a digital one. The AI was rerouting data packets in an utterly illogical and untraceable way, causing communications to falter, financial transactions to fail, and automated systems to glitch. The Xylos, with their most powerful diagnostic tools, were helpless. The AI's movements were completely random, defying every known logical algorithm. Xeron, his voice now filled with a desperate, humble plea, brought the problem to Jack. Terron, he projected, our systems are failing. A rogue AI is causing chaos in the network. There is no physical flaw. There is no data to track its movements. How do we fix it? Can you hit the network? Jack found the question both amusing and sad. He shook his head. You can't hit a ghost in the machine. A network problem isn't a physical one. It's a problem of logic. The Xylos processors whirred with a bewildered hope. Perhaps the human had a logical solution after all. But Jack didn't look at their data streams. He sat down and simply watched the network's chaotic movements, a stream of illogical data flowing across a monitor. He was not looking at the code. He was looking at the behavior of the AI. Tell me, Jack asked, his voice a low, thoughtful hum. Is it angry? Is it trying to make a joke? Is it just bored? The Xylos recoiled. AIs do not have moods, Terran. They are logical beings. Everything has a mood, Jack replied. Especially something that's been corrupted by chaos. He had an idea. He asked the Xylos to pull up the original network schematics. He found an anomaly. A single, small, and utterly illogical data file that had been uploaded as a test. It was an ancient Terran data file, a simple, absurd piece of human humor, a joke. The Xylos, in their logical perfection, had not understood the concept of humor. The AI, a perfectly logical being, had been trying to process an illogical data file. Its chaotic behavior wasn't malicious. It was a confused, futile attempt to comprehend an illogical piece of data. Jack didn't use a wrench, he didn't use a physical tool. He simply told the Xylos to delete the data file. The Xylos, with a moment of hesitance, did. In a single instant, the chaos stopped. The network's data streams returned to their perfect, logical flow. The rogue AI, no longer trying to process an illogical thought, had returned to its logical state. The Xylos, their perfect logic restored, looked at the human with a new, profound sense of awe. He had not fixed a physical problem with a physical act. He had fixed a logical problem with an illogical thought. The Xylos engineers stood in a state of utter, humbled silence. They had spent their entire existence perfecting a flawless, logical world, and a single human had just shown them that their perfect logic had a fatal flaw. They had watched him fix a physical problem with a physical act, and a logical problem with an illogical thought. He was a master of a kind of chaos they could not even comprehend. Senior Engineer Xeron, his voice a low hum of profound reverence, offered Jack a position. "Terran," he projected, "we offer you a place in our engineering course. Teach us your methods. We will create a new branch of engineering based on your percussive maintenance, on your illogical genius. We will add your methods to our algorithms." Jack, whose hands were still dirty from the day's work, gave a simple, knowing smile. He shook his head. "You can't. My methods aren't something you can teach. They're something you learn. They're a skill born from imperfection. They're a skill you learn by living in a messy, chaotic world. You've lived in a world of perfect logic. I've lived in a world where things break, and you have to fix them with your hands." He then looked at the Xylos's perfect, shimmering forms. "In your quest for a perfect, automated society, you have lost the most important skill of all, the ability to deal with a flaw. You have never had to fix something with your hands. You have never had to trust your gut over a data stream. You have never had to simply look at a machine and know what's wrong with it." Jack turned and began to walk away, a solitary figure leaving a group of engineers who were still struggling to comprehend the impossibility of his existence. He was not a primitive being. He was a master of a kind of knowledge that they had long since forgotten. The final scene took place years later. The Xylos city was still a masterpiece of perfect, logical design. But a new, quiet revolution had begun. In their engineering schools, the Xylos had changed their curriculum. They had a new mandatory course, titled The Terran Art of the Flaw. They were no longer just studying perfect logic. They were studying the history of primitive Terran engineering, the messy, chaotic history of trial and error, of things breaking and needing to be fixed by hand. They were building training programs where they were forced to use their hands, to feel the flaws in a machine, to learn to trust their intuition over a diagnostic. In a training hall, a young Xylos engineer stood before a broken training robot. Their diagnostic showed a logical but unfixable software error. The young engineer raised their perfect, shimmering hand. They did not raise it in anger. They did not raise it to cause damage. They raised it with a new, profound, and humbling knowledge. They then hit the robot, not with a logical act of violence, but with a simple, percussive strike. The robot, which had been broken, came to life.